And I am the Community Outreach Program Manager and Coordinator with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service in partnership with the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities. And I am joined today with my colleagues from across the state. Rosa Gale, she's the South Texas Regional Coordinator, Dr. Shelby Vaughn, the Central Texas Regional Coordinator, and Skylar Mueller, the West Texas Regional Coordinator, as well as Andy Crocker, Senior Extension Health Specialist. Before we get started today, I'll go through an overview of the discussion today, as well as provide a few Zoom tips and go over our collaborative effort and a few ways to connect with us. So just a reminder, we're on Zoom. This format is not a webinar format, so we're all actually visible. But if you would like to keep your view on speaker mode, you'll be able to follow along with the PowerPoint and the speaker who is speaking at the time without seeing all of those extra boxes. Please keep your mics muted and your videos off for the duration of the presentation. At the very end, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. And at that time, you can drop questions in the chat and we may have opportunities for you to come off on your mic as well. And so we'll do the presentation. It'll last for about an hour and then we'll have a little bit of time left over for Q&A and then we'll do a quick closing. All right, and then at all times today, there will be a PowerPoint visible and that should allow you to see closed captioning. Right now, it's for some reason stopped working, but when we switch to the presenter, you'll be able to see her closed captioning. So the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities, or TCDD, is a statewide governor-appointed board that is the only entity in state government solely focused on the needs and interests of individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. TCDD is mandated to provide input on state policy initiatives, build communities through statewide grant projects, and educate and inform the public and leaders on developmental disability issues. And for more information, you can visit the link in the chat. And Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service is the outreach and community education arm of the Texas A&M system. For its more than 100-year history, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension has worked to help Texans better their lives with practical, applicable learning through a statewide network of professional educators, trained volunteers, and a presence in all 254 counties and the campuses of Texas A&M University and Prairie View A&M University. And when we're done here today, we're glad to follow up to talk with you more about both agencies and how they work each day to serve the people of Texas. And there was a link dropped about AgriLife Extension as well. And so in 2019, TCDD partnered with AgriLife Extension to create a regional connection of regional coordinators with a mission to help Texans with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So there are regional coordinators throughout the state, and you can connect with us through the link that is dropped in your chat. And so before we get started, co-moderating the session with me today will be Rosa Gale. Rosa Gale is the South Texas Regional Coordinator. She has been working closely on the topic of disability employment awareness with our community partners of the Rio Grande Valley and throughout the South region. After participating in several disability employment related events throughout the year and attending employment coalition meetings, Rosa launched the Disability Employment Awareness Series. And so this past summer, we did a panel series that featured self-advocates and employers. And this is a follow-up to the panel series that we did this summer. So Rosa will now introduce our presenter before we get started. So thank you all for joining us today.
Yes, hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session today. I would like to introduce our speaker who will be initiating our part one of our educational series, and it's called Ready to Work, Developing Soft Skills for Success in the Workplace. Dr. Lakshmi Mahadevan, she has a PhD, and she is an associate professor and extension specialist in special populations with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Dr. Mahadevan has a doctorate in educational psychology with an emphasis in career development education from Texas A&M University. Her areas of expertise include universal design for learning and accessible curriculum. Dr. Mahadevan has more than 15 years of experience in conducting face-to-face and online professional development with educators in Texas addressing various special populations related issues. Dr. Mahadevan evaluates the accessibility of educational programs. She oversees curriculum fidelity and quality control of a community-based life skills program for youth aged 18 to 24 and provides subject matter expertise on advancing equity in career and technical education. So we just want to express our thank you to Dr. Mahadevan for presenting to our audience today. So go ahead, Dr. Heyman.
Good morning, everybody. How is everybody this morning? I'm really, really pleased to be able to have this opportunity from the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities to talk about this topic. Certainly, there is a major talent pool available of employees out there who, if you were just a bit more prepared to ensure that we provide them with a safe and happy an environment that's sort of, but not necessarily customized to their needs, then we would probably be able to improve our all our bottom lines when it came to profit and ensuring that we have a lot more individuals out there who are employed, whose talents we have that remain untapped. So we're going to speak today a little bit about certain things that I've really just curated over the time, the work that I've done. It's pretty straightforward. Most of it should be pretty familiar to all of you, but there might be a few things that might stimulate some thinking as well, and maybe some things that you can think about pre-planning for as you plan to hire individuals with disabilities or work with individuals with disabilities or get them ready for employment, or if you're an individual yourself who is getting ready to be employed, just some things you can pre-plan for in terms of skill sets and make sure that those skill sets are at their highest level when you get hired. All right. I'm about to share my screen, and that's when the closed captioning should be on. All right, can everybody see the screen now with my closed captioning?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Just to reiterate, if you all missed it because I spoke pretty quickly and it wasn't closed caption, we're just going to talk a little bit today about skill sets that you might pre-plan for or make sure you have in place. If you're an employer of somebody who wants to hire somebody with a disability, or you're a person with a disability yourself going into employment, or you're a caregiver of someone with a disability, then you want to help them get ready to be hired and be most effective in the workplace. So before we go on, I am going to do a quick poll here to know a little bit about who all of you are and what roles you might be playing and what interests you have in this particular presentation that you might want to apply into your role. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a quick poll here. And if you would just pick all that apply to your current role, that would be very helpful for us. All right, excellent. So it looks like we have several caregivers, service providers, educators, and advocates or self-advocates in our audience today. Welcome to all of you. If you're a service provider, if you would just reiterate a little bit in the chat to me what kind of services you provide, and give me a little bit more insight into what that might be, I'd appreciate that. And everybody else, also, if you want to add anything about your role, please do put that in the chat as well. I will try my best to keep up with any questions that come up in the chat, but everybody else on the team here today will also make sure that I answer a question if I miss that. So I'm going to go ahead and start. One of the things that I want to mention to everybody is I have my style of presentation tends to be very fast. I speak very fast, and I apologize for that. I'm hoping that this closed captioning will do a good job of translating what I'm saying. But if you miss something, feel free to let me to tell me, and anybody on the team can do this as well, is tell me to either slow down or reiterate or review what I've just said so that we don't end up losing out just because I'm not actually able to modulate my speed. So thank you. I do want you all to note, if you can, if you're a Twitter follower, on the PowerPoint that will be available to all of you, my Twitter account is available on there. What I try to do on that is also provide ongoing resources for working with individuals with disabilities that are currently available. So it might be valuable at some point for you to make a note of something that is said on that during those posts. Okay, I'm just going to go over some of the objectives of what we're going to cover today. We are definitely going to cover some more prominent soft skills, things that I think that we all should definitely concentrate on and be ready with when we are either hired or are going to get hired as an individual with a disability. We're also going to talk about some specific work-related self-advocacy skills that I hope everybody will have in place. I'm also going to give us some teaching tips so that if we are either somebody who is in the position to teach somebody about honing their soft skills, then I'm going to just give us some ways we can do that. And then in general, strategies for being very successful in an setting where you are employed as a person with disability. Will have some sort of rules of thumb and things that will help anyway. And then we'll also include some resources that you can click on for additional reference. I'm also going to provide you in your handout a checklist. I really like that because sometimes we end up with so much information on a PowerPoint that you may not actually be able to use that PowerPoint more effectively when it is, several slides, things like that. So I've tried to parse all of this down into a quick checklist where I'm going to ask you to assess yourself and see whether you are already ready with the skill or are aware of the skill, or you're in the future going to add it to your repertoire of skills so that you can be pre-prepared for whatever role you're going to be playing when it comes to working with individuals with disabilities. Okay. All right, so let's look at some soft skills. These may be very familiar to all of us, but I really do need all of us to reiterate on a daily basis to everybody about appearance. And we want to ask questions like, when you are actually at the workplace, are the clothes that you're wearing appropriate for the job? Remember, particularly when it comes to our individuals with disabilities, we might have some concerns when it comes to safety. We also want to make sure that we have in place comfortable clothes that may not cause them to feel uncomfortable because of touch or texture and things like that, or also ensure that they aren't an impediment for the work they have to do. Also, if there are office dress codes or protocol in place, are our individuals with disabilities aware of those, and are they following those protocol? Our recommendations regarding body piercing, tattoos, etc., are those followed? For example, if we have a rule in place that they need to not be visible, then is everybody aware of that rule and do they dress accordingly? Or if they have to, for example, take off a ring or a piece of jewelry and that so that it is not visible. Are they aware of that as well? Those are the kinds of things that we have to ask and be very, very specific in what we need to be done when it comes to these recommendations so that people can follow the rule. In general, is good hygiene being maintained? These are all just things specifically now with COVID in place. We have to remember sanitizing is a lot more important. Washing your hands is a lot more important. We need individuals to maintain physical distance. And so are we in a position now to follow some of these additional rules that may not be something we may have thought of in the past. So these are some 4 basic things I think you want to think about when it comes to soft skills related to appearance. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about interpersonal skills. I think these are a little bit different than communication skills. I think we always have to think about what it is we are now needing to have in place. In addition to just being able to speak to somebody face to face, there are certain things we have to have in place ahead of time so that when we are in the position to even be on a virtual meeting, for example, we are maintaining a good enough demeanor that our interpersonal skills remain positive. So we want to have a positive, upbeat tone when we speak. We also want to be courteous and attentive. It is very, very difficult for all of us at various ages, whether or not we have a disability, to pay attention. And particularly when it comes to the workplace, there might be some things that we need to ensure that we have some additional ways to focus in place so that when a question is asked or when a instruction is given, we are receiving exactly the information we need to receive, or at least have the skills to ask for additional information or clarify. Okay. Also, when attending presentations, all of us do that a lot more now. Most office places probably have a lot more training in place, professional development wise, and things like that, that all our employees are asked to attend almost every year. So are you prepared to be receiving that information? Because often aren't we all tested on that information too, right? So we want to ensure that all our employees with disabilities know how to take a test online, attend that presentation, or click through those links, whatever it is that is provided to you online, and then you are able to meet the work requirement for trainings. Also, interpersonal skills like being observant and emulating the workplace communication patterns, knowing who is in the authority, ensuring that we are able to provide the respect when we speak to them and the tone that we have, things like that. Also, ensuring that you understand the hierarchy of communication patterns, who is that we have to for sure listen to and understand what they're telling us, who is also a lateral colleague, who is above us, who is even our assistant, so that we are able to communicate effectively with everybody in all those different positions. Another thing that I think we all need to emphasize now as an interpersonal skill is ethical communication. Things that came to mind were gossiping. If something has come up as a rumor, we want to verify that fact before we spread that around. Also, ask the questions. If you feel worried about the ethics of something, we need to be pre-prepared to ask the appropriate question. And so that when we end up choosing to act on something, we know for sure that it is not going against our values or the ethics of the organization you work for. Okay, I'm going to just pause for a minute here and see if there are any questions. Okay, nothing came through, I think, on chat yet, or did I miss something? Okay, thanks, Skylar. Okay, if a question comes through or comes to mind, please do feel free to put it in chat or unmute and ask me. Okay, now that we've spoken about interpersonal skills, the next thing we want to talk about and differentiate from that is communication skills. And we all know about communication. I don't want to really go over what we talk about when it comes to communication skills in general, written and even verbal, as well as even communication that happens via email. All of those we are all aware of. In general, those are good, and those are generally what we would always reiterate when it came to a soft skill. But I want to talk here more for our individuals with disabilities. I want to talk about conversations. Those are some things that we don't tend to emphasize or remind individuals about. So when they communicate, they want to be able to communicate via conversation that ought to be professional by default. Okay, so be very, very cognizant of practicing your professional conversations, ensuring that when you speak, it is always going to be sort of formal. And also, even if it is in an informal setting, say it's even happening at a luncheon that's happening at the office, or if it is happening in an outdoor event, it does not matter. It may feel like an informal setting, but conversation still should remain as formal as possible and as professional as possible. And if you're speaking to work friends at a lunch, then it doesn't have to be formal. That's okay. That's when we want to keep our interpersonal skills in mind, like not gossiping, those kinds of things. But consider every time that you do speak, particularly related to work, start by thinking that this is confidential unless I have to be speaking about it to an entire group, or an entire group of individuals are in the room and we hear information that is then told to us to remain confidential outside of this organization. But we need to pay attention to that, and we need to understand what confidentiality means in this organization and apply it at all times. So this is what I think we all, as individuals with disabilities who are either getting ready to go into a workplace or need to be thinking about when you go into the workplace, what my communication patterns are like and what conversations ensue and what we need to make sure is in place so that the communication is effective. Okay. Teamwork. This is something else I have thought about adding to our repertoire of skill sets. I do believe that now I think it's quite impossible for us to all work in silos. All of us have to work with a team. It may be a small team or it might be a team of many, but at the end of the day, we really need to have honed our skills about working both laterally and also with people who are above us. And how do we do that? We want to know for sure at the end, whenever we are assigned to a team, what the team's job description is, what is the objective, and what role would I be playing in this team. So as an employer or an employee, we want to be very, very specific about what the team does, and we know for sure what role is being assigned. Also, when somebody is in a team, we want to remind them to be flexible, because you have to be very open and supportive of everybody's thoughts, opinions, and contributions of others who are in the group with you. We also want to recognize and remember to respect people's diversity. There's going to be individual differences and perspectives. The same issue might have several different viewpoints that we have to take into consideration. So this might be something that we are not used to, learning about other people's opinions and being respectful. That might be a new skill that we all have to understand for ourselves and use it and apply it, particularly in a team setting in your organization. Also, as a team member, we have to learn to accept and provide feedback in a constructive and considerate manner. So when you're being given feedback, we have to receive it respectfully and use it for our own growth. And then also when we provide feedback, we want to do that in a constructive and considerate manner so that the recipient actually is able to do the same. Okay. And in general, we want to be able to contribute effectively, and for sure, know to ask for help in appropriate circumstances. I think we all should know ourselves well enough to know, I need help. I'm not able to move forward. I want us to be able to ask the questions, but also ask for help in appropriate places and circumstances. Okay. So for example, if a team meeting has happened let's wait till the end, maybe to approach a leader if you need to, or approach a colleague if there's a specific question that you know for sure cannot be asked during this team meeting, or or know how to interrupt and be able to put your hand up or actually ask a question that might actually help this process, but at the same time not be hesitant about it because it needs to be asked at this point and you have determined that you need the help now. When it comes to problem solving skills, I really think that employees with disabilities should be encouraged to learn about and understand how to solve a problem, but also examine it from all angles. Okay, so again, that might entail asking some questions, asking the most appropriate questions. So if a problem has been given to us to solve, then just think about how we're going to go ahead and solve this and understand that maybe we need to get extra help before we start. Also, it might be that there are some problems that seem recurring and we want to determine, we want to get to that point where we are able to evaluate and say, why does this problem keep recurring? And so we get more proactive in our problem solving than reactive. And that is a skill set I think we all need to really hone for ourselves and move into. When you're in the workplace, get a little bit more observant about it, get a little bit more outside the box thinking about a problem, and then also be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that these are problems that could be prevented in the future if you were more proactive. Also, I want us to all learn the skill of paraphrasing. I think this is important. We can practice this at home. We can also practice this with any conversation that we have that's informal or formal. But the question needs to be asked is, I think I heard you say, it is my understanding that, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that. Can you please repeat or just clarify the understanding by saying, I think this is what I understood, and let me just clarify if you wouldn't mind repeating what you said. That is very important. We need to teach those kinds of phrases to ourselves and also use it on a daily basis, because we are all in the danger of understanding based on assumptions, and that may not have been what was said at all. So let's not make assumptions. Let's learn to listen and also paraphrase so we clarify our understanding before we move forward to help with problem solving. I also like the idea of looking at the team and thinking about who might be a specialist in solving a problem that has come up because they're more familiar, or they could be the expert. So as an individual with a disability, we want to have that skill to identify who might be an actual expert that I can go to because they have dealt with this kind of problem before and therefore can mentor us through this problem solving concern. Also, this is something that we have to think about is now that we might have a solution, we apply it, but know that it may not actually be the complete solution, or we might have to evaluate often to see if the solution, first of all, evaluate and then reevaluate to see if the solution still continues to be the best one, or do we need to put something else in place because the problem, although it is continuing to, although it is still there, it may be getting better, but it is recurring. So what do we need to do to change or tweak the solution? So these are some additional skills that I think we all need to have before we go into a workplace that are related specifically to problem solving, which I think now on a daily basis, this comes up. Probably the most common is problem solving. And a lot of our problems come from not having enough communication in place, or not having all the other skills that we mentioned in place that might end up having us to think about a problem. Or it could be something we start with and then we need a teamwork skill, or a communication skill to resolve. Okay, so the problem solving skills are probably the most basic ones, and then we have to start there. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a second and see if anybody has any questions or would like to unmute and ask me a question. Okay, so there's a really good question here from Andy about concepts like team and leader may be new and different. Do you have suggestions for how to help prepare for these dynamics? Absolutely, Andy. I think what we need to do and have in place, one of my teaching skills, one of my teaching recommendations is operational definitions, okay? I think we all have to have everything a lot more clarified and operationally defined as to what any concept at the workplace entails. In terms of a team, we want to say something like, for this particular concern, we are going to put together this bit of this subcommittee, for example, you could call it, or a team of people who are all positioned to actually work on this particular problem. And so it's meant to be temporary. We explain that. We also explain that the team will together decide whether they want to add more members to this team, or also go on and talk about something like, okay, we all have each of these roles to play, but you, for example, are in charge of setting up the schedule. You are in charge of maintaining the progress report. You're in charge of reporting to the higher ups. So then we talk about that as being our team leader. But we define all of these roles in terms of behavior, duties, and very operationally cleanly defined actions, so that when I look at my team, I know exactly who is on it, what they're doing, what my contribution needs to be, and then on the flip side, who the leader is and who I need to report to of sorts when I'm not speaking to the group. Does that help, Andy? That's kind of what I think of as team is. I think we just need to be a lot more clearer. Every time we work with an individual with a disability, we just want to really be much more. I like the teachers who do that very specific rubric with each action given a specific amount of credit. And it's the same thing we want to do in the workplace. The more clarity we have, the better. And the really good news is a lot of the things that we do or tweak for individuals with disabilities really works for everybody. It's the more universally designed your resources, the better. So operational definitions, defining actions, showing how to actually demonstrating to somebody what you want to do. Those kinds of things are all universal and those work for everybody. All of us can benefit from these kinds of guides and this kind of operational definition and clarity. So my hope is that as an employer or as somebody who works with somebody with a disability, you're already aware of this, of your own skill to do this, but then we want to just put that in place for everybody. So operational definitions and clarity, that's really the best way to go. And also I like chunking. Step by step, everything as much as possible, break it up into smaller, more obtainable actions, more obtainable goals, and that would make it easier for all of us to feel success, as well as participate in a way that's most effective and most based on our strength. Okay. Right. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about our next set of skills. This is actually more of a general area. It's not necessarily a skill, but an understanding that I think we all need to have in place of work ethics. Now, this is what I think we all just need to have in place in an overall sort of, if you think about overall work ethics, but really work ethics, again, like Andy mentioned, is again, just defined by what happens in your organization, okay? Or where you want to, how and when it needs to be implemented is really just very setting based. However, in general, when it comes to work ethics, I think individuals with disabilities, we want to be aware of things like accountability. So in this case, I want to operationally define that as being present for the entire required shift. That would be a simple way to define accountability for somebody who has seen the word, but are not sure how it translates into an action. Okay. Also, during the work shift, you can complete all the tasks that have been assigned to you. That means you're being accountable for your actions. When you're talking about responsibility, we are responsible for carrying out the specific duties that go along with the job. So There are specific duties that are assigned to your particular job. Now, you might be asked to help elsewhere, and those are fine, but your main responsibility has to do with this set of job activities or tasks, and therefore we want you to be responsible for definitely completing those, and then you can give deadlines and timelines and things like that based on, those responsibilities. Then we want to talk about integrity, and that is about, it's a little bit more, I think, not really, it's sort of like a vague definition I have here, but really it's about reliability, is just doing the right thing in a reliable way. So that could be something like showing up on time, ensuring that you are at the meetings that you've been asked to attend. If you are unable to come, then we can rely on you to let us know, those kinds of things. So we just want to be able to look at an employee and know that whatever we've assigned them, they will do it reliably, or they will let us know if they need help in a reliable manner. But it's essentially being very, very dependable and reliable as much as possible in all the actions that are taken. A positive attitude would be something we want to recommend that everybody have. That's really being happy and optimistic as much as possible in the workplace. And then if you do have a negative attitude, we want all of us to be aware of the fact that that implies that you do not have regard for rules, which is, of course, cause for termination. So those might be some things that we want to put in place that we may not have thought about, but need to operationally define for all our individuals. So I'm going to pause here for a second, and I'm going to do a quick question for all of you. So those are some of the ones I've covered, okay? Before we go on to self-advocacy skills, I want you to put in chat, what are your experiences about soft skills that I may not have thought about here, or that I would, that we should include when we're thinking about preparing somebody for employment or somebody who is employed. So go ahead and put in chat, if you would, some of your suggestions for soft skills that you know from your expertise that you would like to make sure that is in place. How do we get this training out to high school students? That might be a Morgan question from Dylan.
Great question. We'll answer at the end.
Okay, excellent. Interview skills. Thank you, Chelsea. That is brilliant. First impressions are very important. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And what we have now in place are some excellent examples like on YouTube and things like that we can watch. And we want to be able to use some of the internet related resources to train ourselves and others on getting prepared for an interview skill for sure. Interacting properly with others with respect for space, Tawana, absolutely. And particularly, I think, that is something that I think we are, I mean, even, if you're a young 21-year-old, 22-year-old who has just left high school and has been eligible for special education this whole time, you may not have actually been ever trained on that particular skill, or it doesn't really come up. You're right, but when it comes to a regular workplace, we want to understand what personal space is. That is why I think it's important that we also become teachers. When you are, even though you're an employer, you might have to think about doing some things that are in place in your setting that we need to reiterate often. No inappropriate hugging or touching, Dina, absolutely correct. Preparing for change, yes, that is certainly something that I also talk about in this is often the person may work with different supervisors or managers and not understand whom they need to listen to. Absolutely. Yes, Joanne. And what happens a lot is that we do not warn this is a skill. Preparing for change is a skill set that applies to really all settings, but for sure in an organizational setting that has suddenly gone from being everyday face-to-face to work from home, for example, or somebody who has done something that has often required more hands-on, but now has to think of ways to do that same activity virtually. Those are things that change for sure, but then other things change all the time. Yes, turnover in your team may change. Suddenly your team members may change, the leaders may change, the ones who supervise may change. So yes, absolutely. We want to, I think it's very nice for not just not just employees with disabilities, but all employees to be given a sort of foundation, a sort of a set of things that might already apply to your career as you conduct your career in this employment, which includes something like, listen, we might have teams changing. We might have people who are suddenly in new roles. We will try to warn you when something like this is about to happen, but if it doesn't happen, if the change happens and we're not able to warn you, we're going to try to help you our best to adjust to the change as well. That might be something we put in place and give a sort of promise to our employees that we certainly will take into account the discomfort they might feel with change. So thank you, Giovanni, for that particular suggestion. Understanding harassment, sexual harassment, how actions can be misconstrued, inappropriate jokes and language, absolutely. And certainly a lot of these kinds of things have those standard HR trainings that are given to us, through these online means. So I think we need to sort of give more credence to allowing for maybe somebody who's like an ombudsman type of person, so that somebody can speak to them a little bit more about this rather than just maybe report online, or have more of a personal interaction when something like this happens. So that understanding harassment and things like that and reporting it, you at least know what you can do or what it must feel like when you're going through it yourself. So be able to at least report on discomfort or recognize it, but at least have somebody who you for sure designate as someone who's willing to listen, who's at the workplace, who's willing to listen. So that's an accommodation that might be helpful for most individuals to then at least have somebody to speak with. So excellent point there. Thank you. Adjusting to different work schedules, especially longer schedules, Morgan. Yes, actually, that is very true. And we all have this habit of also not knowing when to shut off, right? And I think it's good that we teach ourselves time management, stress management, and also adjusting when there's increased time and effort that needs to be put in because of some pending project, or understanding that your routine is going to change and you're going to be spending more evening hours here, or you're going to work late till like midnight, whatever. It could all happen. And so absolutely, we want them to be in place as well and be prepared for that. Workplace rules like keeping certain rooms locked, not allowing people in certain areas. Yeah, I also want us to reiterate things like things that work in our classrooms will also work, has to work, or has to be put in place, I think, for all our employees with disabilities. I like the big visible signs. I like the things that clearly say something is, in use or locked or not accessible, or do not open, or cordoned off or something, things that are easy, that's visible, that's visual. Those are things that, and then we do a very effective, a couple of ways to do it. One, we want to do a virtual tour that's available online at all times, so that if an employee forgets or needs extra directions, they can go look at this virtual tour so that they can figure out on a daily basis, because we all have, certainly individuals with disabilities may have memory concerns as well. So today, what they would remember about the structure that they are in may change tomorrow. So we want them to have access to something that they can watch every day. Also, we should teach our employees to ask for help in terms of getting maybe a tour every month if they need it, or at the very least get a little bit more signage and things like that in place, so that once we've taught them where something is, they can go find it again. Yeah, Chelsea, absolutely. Volunteering, again, I like the fact that you brought that up, Chelsea, because I also want our individuals to have enough skill sets to also know when they're being taken advantage of. So I think it's a good two-way kind of street there. So volunteer, but at the same time, know that you might have to do things outside of your job for sure. But also know that you might be doing things and tasks that you're being taken advantage of and given because of the vulnerability that somebody senses in you. So that is a good fine line that I think we teach all our employees, is to absolutely do more than or volunteer for or keep yourself useful. And take initiative. Don't wait to be asked to do a task, absolutely. However, also know that if you are being taken advantage of, just know your own levels of when you can say no, okay? All right, excellent suggestions there, everybody. Everybody's gotten a lot of good suggestions out there. Another thing is that, Morgan, these suggestions stay with the recording, correct? So
Yes, we'll be able to keep a track of all of these.
so that's a good news. So I don't want all of us to forget anything that's come up here, along with the ones I've mentioned. These are some excellent things that I think we can all have in place and will work as a reminder when you come back and view this recording about what you might want to think about and put in place. Also, the checklist I provided you, go ahead and add some of your own points to it, so that you can think about whether it's already in place or whether you would like to add to the skill sets and the repertoires we talked about here. Okay. Now let's talk about self-advocacy skills. So when it comes to being an employee with a disability, I want us to be able to provide eligibility documentation, so that we know why you would receive accommodations, or be prepared to ask for, and then because some employers might need proof, so we just want to be ready. Also, I think all employees have to have and should have a one-on-one meeting with the employer regarding their disability and related needs. And if you need to do this monthly, that's fine, but have at least the means to talk with your employer. Now, whether that means sometimes our employers are not, they're maybe at long distance, so maybe we have the means to talk to them via phone. But I want to have an actual one-on-one conversation that's verbal, because then the employer can get used to your, also if you have, for example, some skills that need to be, that may be your verbal skills, for example, that may be impaired, then the employer needs to be able to understand you and then ensure that there's an accommodation in place among other employees so that they will also understand you. So you want to make sure that you have these one-on-one meetings with the pertinent employer about all these kinds of questions. And the needs could be accommodations, those could be transportation, all the things that you want to ask for are in place. Also, we want to be able to self-advocate enough to know that our accommodations that are currently in place need to be changed or added to or no longer needed. And this is where we want to know who we can speak with. This is about complaining, but it's also about who is my advocate now, for us to be able to identify for us. Once we self-advocate, we also need somebody who can be an advocate from the organization for us too. So we want to know and identify who that is, and when and how to report or complain as needed, as well as just know if you have a need for a mentor, that you seek them out, and once you do seek them out and you have them in place, then you're willing to work with them as much as you can on a daily basis. Okay. Other self-advocacy skills that I think should be in place is that employers should be aware that employees may choose not to self-disclose, okay? And that's perfectly fine. But they should also be able to ask for help in case of routine or personal changes. And this is kind of like the point that was alluded to earlier, is that if the routine or a personnel change or something causes us concern, then we need to speak up for ourselves and ask that adjustments be made, okay? And if you are needing transportation to your workplace, then we ask for that, and ask for any adjustments in the work environment that might be difficult, light, temperature, seating, physical adjustments, along with any kinds of other adjustments that might be required. Things like too much noise, too much stimulation, knowing where there's a safe space to go to, so that, or ask your employers to create a safe space, maybe a quiet room with a couch, that kind of thing. Those are things we can self-advocate for. And communicating effectively your goals. You're in this job setting, you want to advance in your career, then you want to communicate effectively with the employers and let them know that you want to advance, and then ask for help with planning for promotions, for applying for new positions, all of that. We can self-advocate our own career growth. Okay. Likely liability concerns, we just want to be aware of these. There might be some areas where we might have sources of liability. Often if you're transporting our our employees to any setting, then obviously there's a liability there. But then also any kinds of liability that comes from physical access, having to work on noise reduction, for example, or overstimulation, or if we are all engaged in offsite activities, there might be some liability concerns there, because all the safe space that has been created for you in this site may not be emulated elsewhere. So we want to be careful about being aware that there might be areas where we might be potentially seeing liability. Okay, let's look at some of those teaching tips I was telling you about earlier. Simple things, as much as possible, demonstrate through examples. And whoever you are, we can do this on a daily basis. If you are somebody who is able to work with an individual disability in the training setting so that you pre-prepare them, then this is how you want to teach them. But if you're an employer also, you want to do the same way, or anybody who works with you can then teach you this way, which is demonstrate through examples. Just remind often about whatever rules are in place. Also, when appropriate rule following happens, right? When you show up on time, when you are actually following all the rules related to communication, when you seek and work with a mentor, all of those, I want to let you know that you've done a great job. Thank you. This is what rule following is about, and this is what we want to do. It's unless we recognize and praise, even at this age, even for adults, then we are not likely to see the repetition of this, or at least we don't even recognize that we did a good thing. So we want somebody to at least let us know when we follow the rules appropriately. I like everybody to encourage as much curiosity as possible, as well as set and consistently apply those operational definitions you mentioned earlier. Whatever operational definitions you have in place. A simple one I think of often is showing up on time. Define that. What do you mean by that? By showing up on time could be something like walking into the door at 8 a.m. Or it could be that you're seated at your desk and logged into a computer at 8 a.m. But unless you define that for your employees, they may be breaking those rules without even realizing it. Okay, so what we need is what I often talk to teachers about is a rule has to be the best kind of rule that basically gets followed is the rule that's taught and not the rule that's just told to somebody. Okay, so teaching is better than telling. Okay, and being told is not the same as being taught. So every time we just tell somebody about a rule, it's not going to be enough. We have to follow through, we have to explain and give them what behaviors go with that rule, so that when an infraction occurs, both of us recognize as a rule breaker as well as the rule maker. Okay. Also, it is easy for us to either blame our own disability or blame other people's concerns and say that's why we have poor performance. We don't accept that. We want to have that in place as well. And we want to maintain eye contact as much as possible when we're teaching during verbal instruction, and then use humor and personal examples as appropriate. Okay, so none of us is all of us have been very helpful, have been able to really benefit from an accommodation, for example. So use that example and say, yes, I needed to adjust my workspace. I needed to get a standing desk, whatever. Tell them so that they know that it's okay to use that. It's okay to admit and use support when needed. Okay. And also, again, this is something that we want to do ourselves as a teacher, which is paraphrase and have your employee clarify that they've understood, and allow extra time for any kind of tasks completion. And this is more important than any teaching, I think, that's in a workplace, and I think should be done at least once a year, which is time management and stress management skills, particularly as responsibilities change. schedules change, routines change. We want all our employees to have these skills as much as possible. And also mindfulness, those kinds of things in place as well to help them get through what might be causing them concern and stress. Task reminders, I like calendars. Let's maintain those calendars, okay? And use them and send them out on a daily basis, whatever reminders for meetings and things like that. And we want to provide written and email directions as much as possible to accompany verbal instructions. Providing access to technology like screen readers, headsets, assistive devices. These are all things that we can think about and have in place ahead of time. When we look at some of our strategies for success, I think that if we have a job training plan, whoever is in whatever role you have right now, a job training plan for yourself or a job training plan for somebody that you are working with, let's have one and consider and update that comprehensively, okay? Consider need for any kind of transportation. And then whatever site that somebody is going to is Americans with Disabilities Act as accessible. I provided you a link to the Job Accommodations Network, which I really like. They do a great job of giving us some good variety of accommodations for various different disabilities, as well as potential some clinical conditions that might need to be accommodated for. And employees can choose to disclose nature of their disability. Okay, so let's have high expectations. If they choose not to disclose, it's likely that their disability does not impact their performance, and that will be fine. Okay, so let's go with that notion that sometimes disclosure is not necessary. If there are safety concerns, let's determine those ahead of time, and that all employees are not in harm's way in any way, particularly ensure that they all practice those drills and things like that that we want to have in place. Also, if there's a risk management plan, let's go ahead and have that in place and trained on, and then plan and practice exit procedures. In general, we want to do everything in conjunction with appropriate legal counsel and establish those policies. Okay. All right, so here are some of my resources. I know I kind of rushed through the last bit here, but we were at time. So does anybody have, we have plenty of time though now for questions or any comments. So we're still here for that. Sorry, Dina, did you want me to slow down? Okay, I will, is there anything you want me to reiterate? I can go back and do that. How do I teach my high school son self-determination? What's a good example of a goal we could set? I think Sharat's question is excellent. I think one of the main things we want to say to somebody is, I really like person-centered planning. So I would like us to be able to, will we get copies of the slides? Yes, Tina, absolutely. You'll get copies of the slides, correct, Morgan? They can download. So I think a good example to set with anybody really is that we end up actually just asking them, tell me what you want to be able to do in 5 years, okay? Where do you see yourself in 5 years is a good goal, okay? So if we start there and you make it a work-related goal, okay? So they could be saying something like, I'd like to be in an office where I can be working on a computer and doing stuff that's related to building games, video games. That might be a great goal, okay? So we start there, Sharat, ask the question, then decide, okay, what all self-determination skills do we need to get you to that goal, okay? And that's where person-centered planning will come in. What is important for you to accomplish that goal? What is important to you to accomplish that goal? And what is important for you to accomplish that goal is self-advocacy or self-determination skill is one of those important for you, okay? For example, during an interview, you might have to practice a self-determination skill, or you might have to practice a self-determination, self-advocacy skill when you go up and talk about accommodations. But at the end of the day, let's use our goal as our focus and then determine exactly which one of these skill sets is going to be ones that we need to work on, okay? Does that help answer your question, Sharat? Yes, excellent. All right, you're welcome. Any other questions?
We did receive a question in the beginning. Is there a certification preferred if we want to be hired as a job coach?
I don't know. That's a good question. I do not know. I do know that there are, I would recommend that we actually just look at places that allow you to get an associate's degree in different kinds of job coaching types of occupations. For me, a job coach really ends up being somebody who is just a mentor who brings a lot of experience from their particular occupation. There could be general job coaches, obviously, but I think I'm not familiar with what route you would take to get to that kind of certification. But for somebody who is on the site job coach, obviously they are somebody I think who has to have enough experience and knowledge about that job site, right? And be able to coach somebody on the skills required in that job site. So I like the idea of employers identifying for themselves on site who could be a mentor, who could be a job coach, those kinds of things, or make it an incentive for you to become a job coach so that when you hire somebody with a disability, they come on, you play the mentor role for them. So I think there might be a couple of different avenues for that, Skylar. I hope that helps answer whoever's question it was.
Yes, and Robert has posted a link. UNT, I'm assuming University of North Texas has
thank
a
you, Robert. Yes.
certification.
Excellent.
We
That's
do
very
have
helpful.
another question. What is the best way to disclose to a potential employer about their disability and accommodations? Should they wait until they have received the job offer?
That I think is up to the individual. I think if you are in any way concerned about your disability impairing your performance, then I think the conversation needs to be had for certain when you get the job offer, for certain. So you can ask for accommodations, ask for help. During an interview, though, if it doesn't come up, if it's not necessary, a question is not asked, and you're impressed enough and you've done a good enough job to get hired, then you definitely do not need to disclose. I think it's up to us to decide then. I do like the idea, though, of spending a little bit of time researching the place that you're going to be going to and knowing ahead of time when disclosure or if disclosure is necessary. Okay. Thank you, Robert. They have many training opportunities as well at the University of North Texas. Fabulous. Good. So that might be something that is helpful for all of us who are interested in becoming a job coach. And remember, the job coach role does not need to be limited to just individuals with disabilities. I think we can certainly have an area that's a little bit more accommodation, self-advocacy oriented. But think about job coaching for lots of us, for teenagers, all the way through adults who are seeking re-entry into the workforce. Yeah, like Silas said, if anybody wants to unmute and ask me a question, I'd be happy to address it.
As we continue to wait for more questions, I do want to go ahead and have someone drop the evaluation link in the chat. Evaluation is really important for what we do for AgriLife Extension as well as for TCDD, and that will help with us forming new topics and conversations to have in the future. So if you could, when that link is dropped, please make sure that you click on it and complete it. And I'll also be able to send the PowerPoint and handouts that Hema provided, or Dr. Mahadevan provided today, as well as the survey link and any other information that was shared. So all of the Q&A responses will be shared as well.
So Andy asked a great question. If a parent or a self-care, if a parent or a self-advocate are reluctant about employment, are there a few things we could tell them about protective factors as opposed to just the risks they're thinking about? Absolutely. I think one of the things that we want to really relate this back to is independent living. Okay, what are your plans for independent living, and how do you want to go about being that person, the one who's able to take care of themselves, have enough money to pay your bills, and be able to essentially be both financially as well as emotionally independent, and just be the adults that you're meant to be. So I think in general, we want to ask those questions about what our plan is to become an independent, to go on to be a person who lives independently. So if our goal is to live independently, then we want to just think about some of our skills that we put in place to get the job as ways to protect, as ways to ensure and sort of protect our path and our confidence levels to get to that goal. Okay, so if I have the education, then I'm likely to get a good interview and for a position that I would like to get hired in. If I have advocated for myself and gotten myself the accommodations I have in this current position, then I can talk about career advancement. You know, those are some ways I think we can think about. You know, yes, there might be some concerns, some risks about going into the employment, but there's also some real wonderful goals that you can set that might help you get to that independent living and that ideal self that you're aiming for. So I hope that helps, Andy. Just think about it as something that, you know, where would we like to be in terms of that scale of where I can look at myself and feel like I've done all I can to take care of my own needs, but also be successful in the workplace. All right. Any other questions, if you would like to unmute and ask? Hey, Eric, it's good to see you. I see a former student here today. Thank you, Robert, and thank you for your attention today, everybody, and your participation. I've really enjoyed doing this, and I'm hoping for another opportunity to speak with all of you again. But my contact information is on that PowerPoint as well. So if anybody wants to email me or continue to have this conversation, I'd be happy to make myself available. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mahadevan. And then I'm gonna just share, for the people who are still here, share my screen for the last few announcements from Rosa and I. Okay, so again, this was the first session of our 3-part educational series for disability employment awareness this week. We will have 2 more sessions this week. On tomorrow, we will talk about vocational rehabilitation services from a representative from Texas Workforce Commission. And then on September 23rd, on Thursday, we will talk about family supports and roles for the job search. I hope that you all can attend. I know a lot of you are already registered for those 2 sessions as well, but go ahead and spread the word about those, and a link to register for those if you haven't has been dropped in the chat. And then just a reminder to complete the evaluation link that was dropped in the chat. And then if you need to contact myself or Rosa, there are our emails, which have also been dropped in the chat. And again, you can reach Dr. Mahadevan through her contact information that was provided in the handouts. Lastly, we will for sure email all of you with all of this information too. But thank you each for joining today's session. And again, thank you, Dr. Mahadevan, for providing really insightful information as we continue this conversation. And that is all.
Thank you, everybody.